We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Looks like the rain has gone.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Mankind Podcast. It's Boysen Hodgson, the podcast where we're setting out to prove week on week that there is indeed more than one way to be a man. And today I am so excited. This conversation is going to be broad and deep, and I know that you're going to get a lot out of it. I'm just projecting. So I'm with Will Cady this week. Say hello, Will.
Really happy to be here. Thanks for having me on this.
Will Cady is many things. He's walked a path from Zen monasteries through touring with rock bands into his current role as the global director of Karma Lab at Reddit, where he also serves as the company's weekly meditation guide and tarot reader. We're probably going to touch on that somewhat in this conversation. Okay, he studied with virtuoso musicians, mystical healers, and boundary-breaking entrepreneurs to develop a uniquely potent practice for cultivating creative energy. That was a beautifully alliterative sentence. This practice is at the core of how he builds, leads, and advises teams of creators today. In his previous role with Reddit, he connected brands with fast-growing pockets of music, art, and experience. Just as they reach their tipping points, his partnership work covers a majority of Fortune 100 brands. He's also a regional Emmy winner here in New England and a graduate of the Berklee College of Music. Will, I'm super stoked.
Let's dive in. Let's talk.
So the first thing I want to take our listeners to is Brimfield, Massachusetts, down Route 20. In the central part of Massachusetts, taking a left or take a right at the hotel, drive out through your winding road, New England houses on your left and right, the leaves falling, turn left onto a dirt road, the winding road, the road forks, take the left at the fork, follow the dirt road down to the end. And at the very end, there's a red house, probably turn of the century, 1890s Victorian house, 2 stories, and another small house and a boathouse out on the water. This place was Wild Goose Zendo.
That's right. Red Gables.
Red Gables. And Red Gables, that house connects Will and I, and connects Will's dad, Bill Cady, and some other crazy characters who I'm sure that we'll touch on. But I don't think that you and I were ever there at the same time.
And isn't that interesting? So now it's time for us to talk.
Yes. Now it's time for us to talk. 20 years later.
Yeah.
20 years later. So let's go back to 20 years ago. You were 6 years old or something like that.
Basically 18.
You were 18 years old. Would you say that those kind of early, well, your dad and mom were both from the book. So we're going to be talking about Which Way is North, Will Cady's new book. We're going to talk about mystical experience. We're going to talk about makers and creatives. We're going to talk about mystical stuff in here. What set you up to be in this path to write this book?
Well, I would say the experiences that I had down that dirt road played a major role in that. So the book effectively starts with a scene where I'm sitting with one of the Zen masters alongside that lake right there. And I'm an 18-year-old being kind of put through what I remember being referred to as an ego deconstruction ceremony, which when you're dealing with an 18-year-old man, I mean, you got a lot of work to do on ego deconstruction. And that was a moment of being humbled and challenged and brought into a mystical experience of no thingness, non-existence, that I don't know if I want to call it a peak experience or a depth experience.
Yeah.
Right? But one that became one of many incredible reference points in the continuous unfolding, the reconstruction, deconstruction of my ongoing egos throughout the rest of my life. So my parents blessed me with a lot of relationships and a lot of experiences that have left me wondering, what was that, for a very long time? And effectively, I think that that's what this book is really wrestling with, is not even trying to answer those questions, but share them with other people.
Yes. Thank you. And share them with other people within the framework of a person. I'm just going to praise you, right? Within the framework of a man who knows how to wrap metaphor and visual and what's present and what's not present into a framework. Yeah, like I'm familiar with, native, with indigenous practices of kind of wheel of life and the directions and some of those things. There's a certain take on that in here, but it's brought into such an incredibly modern present context that, yeah.
Yeah, well put. That really matches my intention with it. So I really wanted to define a modern practice that is as mindful as I'm capable of being, of not appropriating from other cultures and traditions, while tapping some of the universal facts of the human experience, directions being one of those things. And in my own experiences that I referenced earlier, tapping into directions is something that you would encounter across indigenous ceremony, Kabbalistic meditation practices, other different modalities of mysticism work with directions. It's also something that I think is fundamentally important in a modern digital space. When you're dropping into another world, your ability to comprehend the different directions around you is fundamental to the programming code. When you're talking about a lucid dreaming practice, checking in with the directions around you is fundamental towards grounding into that reality and exploring that reality. And throughout this entire book, I'm presenting these things, directions just being one of many different principles that are within it, not with the language of spirituality, but with the language of creativity. Because to me, they're the same thing, just with different words. And the path that I've walked has blessed me with a career where I can be called a professional creative, and I've thrived utilizing what I know from spirituality, but calling it creativity.
Utilizing
until
what you've
now
learned from spirituality and calling it creativity. Yes. And beautiful and well done. There's a scene in the book that I want to take us to, which was just pre-pandemic when you were at a big conference.
Yeah.
And there's something about what you're trying to teach or what you're trying to show in that scene that I think is something that many of us have been experiencing over the last 4 and 5 years. Can you tell that story and just bring us to that frame?
Yeah. This whole book was an experience of dialogue with my conscious self and my unconscious self. And you gave me some well-received praise about how I work with metaphor. The book itself is an instruction manual for how to do exactly that. Because when you're in a dialogue with your conscious self and your unconscious self, you're kind of dropping into a metaphor, right? You could say like to be a drop in a wave, but what does it smell like to be a drop in that wave? How does it feel in your body as you rotate with its turning, right? So that's writing inside of that metaphor. That whole scene that happened really happened. It really did. Now, I did scramble a couple of things for, people's privacy and whatnot. But the conversation took place where I was sitting across from let's just say a very powerful marketer, somebody that moves a lot of money for a very, very large company. And we had formed a relationship. This is at the Consumer Electronics Show, where we would basically step outside the pomp and circumstances of our two businesses and just talk about what's really going on. And that he called me out in a conversation where he asked me this question that he was very adept at asking, say, what do you see? Kind of recognizing that there's a vision that I carry, which I call creative vision in the book. And I sort of reflexively started saying all the buzzy words of the time. And I was stopped, and it was like, no. What do you really see? And at that point, I switched gears. And I stopped being the marketer and I started being the mystic. My seat of my awareness moved from my head into my heart. And I started speaking in a way that would make me feel very self-conscious, coming across as naive, idealistic, a customer, not a seller, right? Not somebody that is stoic and behind the scenes. You're not supposed to do that, supposedly. Mm-hmm. And I spoke to what I was intuitively feeling at that time. And I'm not saying I'm out ahead or that anybody else wasn't feeling this, because we all were. But in that time, I said the thing that we were all feeling, that this is January of 2020. Something is coming. This is all about to break. And this idea of healing is coming to the forefront. There's a new story that wants to come in, and this old story is going to break. And in that moment, instead of rejection, I found profound acceptance, and two humans sitting across from each other in this profound moment in the collective human story, finally being honest about what's really going on. And so the conscious effort of writing that was telling the story of that experience. The subconscious effort was the way that it unfolded in the writing. I realized upon review that I wasn't recounting this scene with this individual. I was speaking to the audience in this scene. And this person is a proxy for the reader. And if anybody is holding any kind of profession in any sort of industry that moves resources or value, I'm speaking directly to them. If there's somebody that wants to step into a seat of power in any way, I'm speaking to them. And I'm showing people what it looks like when you can be really honest and speak from the heart in a way that used to maybe be embarrassing in the business world, but is now accepted as profound.
That's exactly where I was kind of going, because I thought that it universalizes something that many of us, wow, we're in illusion. Wow, yeah. We're in samsara so much in our everyday worlds, right? It's just like, okay, we're all going to go around and pretend that this whole projection that we have in front of us and everything that's going on is like real, and we can tap on it and knock it. But what was so profound to me about that particular scene was, yeah, everybody knows.
Everybody knows. Everybody knows. And in that one, it was very acute. I mean, you want to talk about samsara. We were in Las Vegas during this moment when over 100,000 marketers and technologists descend upon this city and stuff a conference hall and jump into the casinos and all the nightclubs. And it's just lights and movement and energy and madness. And it was right before the breaking. It was just about 2 months later, absolute stillness across the entire world. And we knew it was coming, but we weren't saying it. All of us.
So we are 2020 to 2023 now, the end of 2023. So that breaking that happened and that call, that word, healing, mm-hmm. I don't think that that's any less present in what's going on. And what are you sensing these days?
We're still integrating it. So on the mystical side of things, what I've learned And I share a little bit in the later chapters of the book, in the What You Receive chapter, and some of the dialogues and lessons that I've learned from psychic healers and whatnot. The change happens on the spiritual body before it descends into the lower frequency bodies of the mental body, the emotional body, and the physical body. We're starting to make that transition, I think, between our emotional body and our physical body as a collective society, culture. Things are starting to actually manifest, but the change happened in 2020. And it's coming in waves, right?
Yeah.
So there's all of these different moments where COVID happens, blockchain comes out, crypto comes out, AI comes out. It's all the Aquarian story for those that are familiar with what that means. And it seems chaotic until you verse yourself in what the Aquarian story is, and it's all very orderly. And healing is a huge, huge part of that, because the Aquarius is the cupbearer, right? And are you holding poison or medicine, right? You're responsible for what you carry. And I do think that as we turn into 2024, the integration is going to get really physical. I think that there's a lot of building that people did in the background. This book is my version of what I built in the silence of that time. I was at a wellness event last night, and there was a business that was launched that was built in the silence of that lockdown. There are so many different fruits that are ripened now, that are ready to come to bear from that spiritual change that we all went through. Everybody had it in some way, but not everybody has integrated it. Not everybody has built upon it. So I put some numbers in the book to kind of size the growth of the wellness industry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is a multi-trillion-dollar industry at this point, but that's just one vector to try to qualify it, speaking to the marketer audience. I think we intuitively know that when we wake up in the morning, healing is something that is more present in everyone's heart and mind than it was 3 years ago. We all know that. It's very, very visceral. There's something has changed in our collective psyche. There's plenty more to say there, but it's an ongoing change. We're entering literally a new age. We really are.
Yes, so much, so different. So I'm going to take us back. We're going to go deep, come up, go deep, come up.
Yeah.
Something that I want to just describe in the book. So which way is north, right? And you've already said it implies, it references the directions and how we interact with them. You moved not into cardinal directions, as many of us in MKP anyway will be familiar with the kind of cardinal directions. Do you want to talk a little bit about, just from a high level, how you see the directions in the book?
Yeah, I do want to talk about that.
Yeah.
So there are, in the beginning, it kind of references two compasses. You have the outer compass and the inner compass. And the outer compass is your cardinal directions, and that deals with objective reality. The inner compass deals with subjective reality. And the power comes from knowing how to align your inner compass with your outer compass, to align your inner experience with your outer expression. And so every chapter of this book is an exploration of each of the different directions in the compass, in the creative compass, the 7 directions system. So you have what is in front of you, what is behind you. To your left, you have what do you receive. To your right, you have what do you give. Underneath you, you have what you rest upon. Above you, you have what shines upon you. And then in the center, you have what is in your heart. That's the 7th direction. So these are all questions, and they're strategically open questions, because you consciously you consciously ask, and then you unconsciously answer in the meditation system that this book describes and that I teach regularly. That is the system by which you can face your anxieties, your emotions, articulate them, and then transmute them into creative action. Now, where you want to send that creative action depends on where you are in the world. And so there is a lot of symbolism Totems, shared ideas are placed upon the cardinal directions. You might have the totem of a bear, for the north, for example, in some systems. That's not for nothing. That means something to the culture that ascribed that story there. So you might want to give something to that. You might want to receive something from that. That might be something that is in front of you. That might be something that is behind you. There's a very literal way to navigate your creative reality by turning the wheels of these two compasses. And it's a bit of a higher technical share of what this book offers. It's meant to meet people at a lot of different levels.
Yeah.
That's pretty in depth right there, but that's what we're working with.
That's beautiful. So if you didn't quite get that, the book is going to take you through the 7 cardinal directions, and in every direction, it's going to offer you an opportunity to open a meditation. So for those of us, now we're back to Junpo, right? Now we're back to Red Gables. For those of us who have a meditation practice, this was like a big, deep inhale. It's just like, hey, I'm gonna align myself with this and sit down into this meditation. And for me, it's like I put one earbud in and put on a frequency binaural beat, read the passage in the meditation, and then sit with the meditation.
Smart.
Which, yeah, so cool. So that's what the book offered me. Let's cycle back up to, I loved what you said about the spiritual and what's underneath, and then how the vibration takes some time to get out into the emotional body, out into the intellectual body, out into the physical body. Let's go way back. We have a shared connection with the Mankind Project. And before we started recording, we just touched on the fact that had a powerful impact on you when you were a very young man, and kind of helped launch some of this journey. Let's talk about that.
Profound. I didn't even know the privilege that I had to have that experience. And it's been an anchor point for me for so many different parts of my life. The challenges that I've been through, and also the mountains that I've climbed, the character that it helped me build. I can't be grateful enough for it. And I didn't know while it was happening. I did it to get closer to my dad. It was really important to him. And he said, it's really important to me for us to share this. And I was 18, and I was a jerk. But I was like, okay, like, we'll do this. And in this experience, I learned about accountability. I learned about facing my shadow. I learned about how to really see others. I learned how to clarify my personal mission and stay true to that. All of those things I learned for the first time in one weekend in such a heavy dose. So talk about integration and the change that happens in the spirit before it manifests in the body. 20 years later, I really think in the deep mining of my own psyche that I had to do to write this book really is when I uncovered even more gratitude for what that one weekend brought me. I had no idea at the time.
Yeah, thank you. I was 32, I think, when I went through. Yeah, I was 32 when I went through the weekend. And similarly, there's areas where I'm still integrating it. And I think that you and I went through the weekend at the same camp. Did you go through it, Claire Barton?
It's on Bear Mountain. You would remember it if me and my buddies were late and kept everybody waiting for like 2 hours. That was the one. And then we had to immediately step in the circle and be held accountable. If you remember that, then we were at the same one.
That's wild. Yeah. Do you want to talk about your dad? There's a beautiful story about your dad in the book as well.
Yeah, I do. I have his necklace with me right here. I thought it'd be appropriate to have that with me.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, did describing what you can't see for the listeners. So they're in the meditation retreats, the silent meditation retreats that they did for Rinzai Zen, for the Hollow Bones Zen order, which Bill Cady, Will's dad, was involved in, as well as Junpo, who we've been talking about, and Diane Fu, George Birch, and a number of other men. When they went through those long silent retreats, they would come out with a bead, and the beads get onto their necklaces. So I just saw a very richly ornate bead of little replicas, little heads, little Buddha heads.
And then his bag, his satchel,
and his talisman.
Yeah, from the
very
Mankind
well-worn
Project.
Talisman from the New Warrior Training Adventure.
So it's been a heavy totem that that I've kept with me. I used to wrap this around the headstock of my bass when I was a professional musician, and just I kind of consider my bass my lightsaber, right? So I wrapped it in my spiritual mojo, and that was a big one. I used to, whenever I really needed to call upon some courage, some deep masculine energy of a very heavy spiritual kind that my dad represents, I would wear this. And there's many business meetings that I went to in the early days of building Reddit that I'd roll up in a button down sales guy shirt, but then underneath these strange beads would be poking out, and people would look at them, and it gave me this quiet confidence. I was like, yeah, that's right. There's something weird in here. So it's a power totem. It's a power totem. And I think that among the many different threads of what his spirit does for me teased me into the lessons of why he was such a peacock. He just showed his colors all the time.
Yeah.
And when I was a teenager, I was embarrassed by that as a teenage kid. I was like, you're embarrassing me. Stop being who you are, right? But then as I get older, I started to realize the power and importance and virtue of just placing those hints in front of people so that it opens up a question that takes you somewhere important.
Wow, that's lovely. And the image that comes to me, we're all out here, right?
Yeah.
And we're all signaling to one another in ways big and small, but that is kind of that beautiful thing. If I see a man now with something interesting, something going on like that, it's there's almost an invitation that I think is emerging in our culture. Let's just cut through the bullshit right away.
Yeah. Enough talk about the weather, right? Let's talk about that necklace.
Right. or whatever, right? Let's talk about that thing. Let's connect on a real level in a real way. Really cool. I'm going to go back into the book, and I'm going to go into a later piece of the book that I just want to, first of all, your iconography. So graphic design, and for all of you who are geeks and geek out about that kind of stuff, it's beautiful. It's integrated throughout the book. It has a visual cosmology. Does that word work?
I think that's fair.
Yeah, that fits with it. I love, there's this idea of it. This is in A Vision, getting out of the way. A vision inspires action. Listen to these definitions. Body, mind, and spirit make a human. That is emergence. Body and mind make a human's sensation. That is a subset. Body and spirit make a human's presence. That is a subset. And mind and spirit make a human's belief. Wow.
Yes, I'm so glad you picked up what I was putting down there, because that's also, that example is given to articulate a larger point. So it happens in passing. So it's not even like framed in a very important way. And I do that all throughout the book because it's an example sort of on a higher octave of something that I like to do with writing, where never say the word thing if you can avoid it, right? Or if you're going to use a verb, using an expressive verb, like an economy of language, of expression. And so that's in the writing, but really what I'm talking about in that passage is the way that ideas come together, that one idea plus another makes a third. And I was thinking about what I wanted to utilize as an example, and I was like, but what if that example is cool in and of itself? And so you're the first person that picked up on that and reflected it. I'm so excited that that resonated, because it's a lot.
It's a lot. And the idea, I'm a word guy, and emergence and how things combine to create larger things has a psychoactive impact.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, the additive connotation of different concepts, you can sit with one line of that and just experience how do all the connotations and felt senses of this word and the felt sense of this word emerge into a third thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And all of these words are fingers pointing to the moon.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
And it's about paying attention to the moon, and so, you know, language, beliefs, rituals, etc. Those are English words that capture a very broad energy, but at least a segment of that. And so the invitation there, and this is why geometry is so powerful, and so that chapter shows visually the geometry of these combinations. You kind of just got to sit with the shape of it, and then meditate upon, contemplate upon what do these directions, because words are kind of directions pointing somewhere. How do they make me feel? What do they bring up in me? You know, beliefs, for example. Many different people have a different relationship with the word belief, and that's worth contemplating.
Yeah. Thank you. Can we talk about Reddit?
Sure.
So you have been, would you say that you have been instrumental in creating a culture?
I think anybody that spends a long time at a company, and it's been about 8 years for me, fundamentally becomes a character in the story just by virtue of their presence.
And you have been, you know, as a marketer, a maker, a kind of visionary and mystic in that particular intersection of things that is Reddit. How are you feeling about human interaction with technology? How are you feeling about AI? How are you feeling about we're all creatives, right? We live in an era of creatives.
Yeah. So what first brought me to Reddit, I had quit the media and marketing industry because I was very disillusioned with it and where it was going, especially in the rise of data. And when I joined Reddit, there was big glowing words on the wall in HQ that are still there and are there in every office. And those words are remember the human. And that is this not so secret value that is really the compass of the company. And that's what's kept me there this whole time. And the character that I've enjoyed playing within this company is really trying to stretch that definition of exploring, for me, what does it mean to be human? And that's what has given me the license to maximize my creativity, to bring my spirituality into the workplace, and to be a meditation teacher, to be a tarot practitioner for this company and for, some of our partners, even that to brandish this identity of this very spiritual, creative character, to brandish that identity as a very spiritual and creative character is an odd thing. And I think it's an act of co-creation between the community of Reddit, the company, and me, the individual within it. And there's a little bit of a meme going around right now with generative AI where it started with somebody depicting a bunny that's happy. And then they just said, more happy. And they keep saying more. And eventually it just becomes like a being of pure energy, like in the cosmos. And I feel like that's been my story with Reddit as a company, is they just keep saying more to me, more, like be more creative, be more spiritual. And then I'm just, going into these domains that are so surprising to bring into the business world. And I get the most common message that I get from people that don't know me is, how are you able to bring woo into the workplace? And I think it's such an interesting question to be asked. And I have a soapbox answer for that. And I can get on it if you want me to.
Yeah, what's the soapbox answer?
Because we've divested from the humanities in order to fund STEM. And of course, science and technology and engineering and mathematics are vital to our success as a species. But so is our understanding of what it means to be human. And we can't live in this world right now and not recognize that technology has run away from a heart, from a moral compass. And so there is such a gap in the education that people that are building our technologies have in humanities, in the arts, in the experience of the human story, that people like me have got to bring woo to the workplace, because that is the most boiled down material that so much of art and storytelling is based upon. Tarot is a system of story. The Zodiac is a system of story. It's not about belief. It's about creativity. It's about story, and we desperately need it because we divested too much from it.
Let's talk about tarot. And it's right there, right? That tarot is an act of story, and that is a part of story. So yeah, you can't, in my head, right? That's about as woo as it gets.
Totally. Yeah. That's so witchy.
It's so witchy, right?
Yeah.
So talk about it as a creative act, as a human act.
What a lot of people there's a couple things that a lot of people don't realize about tarot. One is how long it's been with us and how deeply it's threaded into Western culture. So playing cards, poker, blackjack, everything that powers the casinos in Las Vegas is based upon the tarot cards. So we went from reading fortunes to trying to make fortunes using the same things. The other thing that people don't realize is how in-depth and sophisticated the blueprint underneath those cards is. It's not just 4 suits, numbers 1 through 10 with kings and queens, but you add over 20 new jokers to that deck that also mean fundamentally different things. Now, all of those are correlated to classic planets, different astrological signs, different Hebrew letters, different sephirot on the Jewish Kabbalistic tree of life, the 10 emanations of creation, all of the pathways between them, all of the elements are represented there as well. So there's deeply, deeply, deeply layered metaphysical machinery inside of these cards. And so when you flip one over the table, you're not just looking at one card. You're looking at something that is so incredibly nested with meaning based upon esoteric systems for creation. And then you lay that out on a table in a spread that itself has meaning. You've got multiple cards that are rich with meaning and a spread that is rich with meaning, and our minds are meaning-making machines. So let's put aside for a second the idea that anything special is going on, and let's just look at the simple fact of a human mind trying to make sense of something in front of it. That is a ritual that is going to help you get into alignment with the truth. because you're going to enter that experience with one story and you're going to exit it with another. And then you've got to integrate the differences to create a synthesis between those two that is fundamentally going to move you in some way, because the story you've been telling yourself is in some way wrong. And the story that you're being told by the tarot cards is in some way wrong. So you're getting scrambled. And then in that scrambling, you rebuild. And in that rebuilding, I do believe that you get closer to the truth. And there's a lot more going on too.
That is, yay. The opposite of objectified everything, right? That is the subjectified allness, the subjectified everything.
Yes.
Strip it apart, remake
yes.
the meaning. What does that do in us?
Yes. I am a champion of the subjective experience, that I believe technology can be built in the subjective plane in the same way that technology can be built in the objective plane.
And here we are, right? So here we are at the dawning of the age of AI.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel looking forward?
So I get a lot of newsletters, kind of keeping my pulse on whatnot. And there's a tech writer named Shelley Palmer, and they cover the beat on whatever's going on, industry news-wise. They put forward something that I didn't know I was waiting to see in an email that they sent around yesterday, where they basically proposed that we have entered the year 1 GE, which is after the generative era. Basically saying that after the launch of generative AI, we can no longer guarantee that any content or media or information is untouched by the hands of generative AI. So this is a new first year. And that just exploded for me, because it's a deep yes. It is a very, very deep yes. On the surface level, from a cultural standpoint, is the idea of this is the start of a new age, a new 2,500 year cycle, where it's been 2,500 years since the last first year, and now we are entering a totally different reality that does merit its mark on the calendar. That's a fun idea to play with right now, but I do think that as time goes on, similar to how it was decided when 1 AD will be a retroactive assessment of, okay, we're in a new world now. When did this begin? And I think that whoever gets to decide how we measure our time and our calendars will probably look back and say, this was that first year. That is so profound.
Yes. I also have terror in here as well. Yeah. Are you carrying that? Are you carrying fear?
No. Not for that. So in the book, I write about this a little bit in the What Shines Upon You chapter. I look at the turning of the ages, and in each of these different ages is a new expression of the light of salvation. And so every zodiac is imbued with a story that describes what that salvation is. So the light of salvation in the age of Pisces, which we're leaving, is the prophets. The light of salvation in the age that came before that, Aries, was the conquerors, the mighty, right? And then the age before that, Taurus, was the empires, rules of governance. And before that, Gemini, it was the marketplace. And before that, Cancer, it was nurturing and healing. And so the light of salvation is in the Aquarian story, in the cupbearer. And it's very, very, very rich. The cupbearer, you could say, well, yeah, AI is the cupbearer. It's the assistant, right? It's the one that serves us. But in the story of the cupbearer, Ganymede was discovered in the field by Zeus, who descended as an eagle and took Ganymede to be cupbearer to the gods. So it's actually about a meeting of higher and lower intelligence, right? So that's in there as well. And it's not just AI, it's also mycelium. It's looking to the skies and believing in UFOs a little bit more, UAPs. That's awakening in us as well. This is where we're looking for the light. And what I feel holds the shadow is the prior story of the last age, that the prophets emerged in defiance of the conquerors, and the conquerors emerged in defiance of the empires, and the empires emerged in defiance of those free marketplaces. Everybody's partying a little bit too much, right? And the parties emerged in defiance of the caves where we were sheltering. And so in the turning of the light, a new story steps into the light as the old story steps into the shadow. You just got to roll with it.
And then they veered off into integral theory.
Totally.
Yes.
Totally.
Yes.
Ken Wilber is a smart man.
Yeah. And that kind of resonates with that. And then I'm also thinking of David Graeber, and I'll find it, the big orange book.
The Dawn of Everything.
There you go. That one.
I've been reading that right now. I'm about 3/4 the way through. And part of the reason that I've been reading that is to be honest with myself, because I put this idea in print of the rolling of the great ages as a model for history. And I'm like, let me see if the experts, align. And they don't talk about that, but all of the dates corroborate in terms of globally, these ideas just kind of emerge in the human consciousness. Oh, what if we had a city? Right? It's just like a flashpoint.
Yeah.
The idea of a city was always there as like a platonic ideal in our collective imagination, but it wasn't in the light. We couldn't see it in the same way that mycelium was always there, but we couldn't see it in the same way that our energy technologies have always been there, but we couldn't see it. So that is talk about something that's going to take some time to be integrated, but that book is like, that's a game changer. That book is incredible.
Yes. Very, very good book. And also there's something freeing and liberating in the ideas that come forward in that book around the kind of fluidity. It's not this and then this and never that again, right? Yeah. That there's a fluidity between all of these things that is very much embedded in integral theory, where we get to hold on to, transcend, and include that good stuff, the good and beautiful that was in the other places.
And it's about looking at the evidence with a new set of eyes.
Yes. Yeah, which is also really cool. How about humans? How do you feel about so this book is where do you go for community these days? What do you think that I should be, or we should be, prioritizing in our human relationships?
Community is it. It's clearly rising in a lot of different areas in the world that I operate in with Reddit. I mean, community is the calling card. And usually when I'm up there, talking about big ideas, we're talking about community. It's nothing new, that's for sure. But we've realized how much we need it, basically. And so I think that we're all trying to rebuild it. I don't think that we've built it yet. I think that the breaking in 2020 and what we were talking about earlier, as far as the spiritual change that then has to manifest in a physical form, and that's kind of happening now. I think that finding our communities is a big part of that right now. I was at a wellness event last night for my friend Shira Lazar. She just put out a journal and with her co-founder Jordana. They started a company during COVID, during lockdown, called Peace Inside. And it's all about wellness events, and they put out a journal. And there were like 4 other people that I have encountered in my mystical and creative wanderings that were there. And I was like, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? And I had a sense that, this is my community. And I think that was a really big impulse behind why I wrote this book, is because I wanted it to be my calling card to find my community, to enter my community. Hey, I did a thing, right? Like I brought turkey, I brought stuffing, I brought something to the table. This is my contribution. And that has changed the dynamic for me. Making a contribution is clearly a key to finding community. And that's also the same thing that I would recommend to brands trying to find online community, is make a contribution. On the individual level, it's the same thing. So I'm just like everybody else in the process of discovering that right now. It feels good.
It feels good. So we're getting to the end of our time. Everything that you've heard in terms of references, like I'll go look up Peace Inside, I'll look up Shelley Palmer, the books that we've been talking about, look for them in the show notes. Which Way is North, A Creative Compass for Makers, Marketers, and Mystics by Will Cady is available everywhere now. Go get a copy. Mine is heavily annotated already, and I'm looking forward to going back into it. Where would you like people to come and find you?
I am most active on LinkedIn and Instagram. So my handle is WILLCADY, and it should be pretty easy to find me if you just search for my name there. I'm also on Spotify. My music's on there, so there's some good stuff, and I'll be recording and releasing my audiobook soon. So there is a creative vision for my future as a multimedia speaker, musician, worker of sound that will be is already alive on Spotify. So find me on the socials and find my art on Spotify.
Find your art on Spotify, which brings me to Will Cady's art. So at the end of this episode, as soon as we finish recording here, there's going to be a song built in to this episode of the Mankind Podcast. That song is called What Fills the Gap. I have posted the link to What Fills the Gap out into the world many, many times now. And in any conversation that I enter into where spirituality and the nature of reality are in play, I share what fills the gap. Do you want to give people a clue about it, or do you want to just let them go?
It's a portal. And Which Way is North and What Fills the Gap are both art as portal.
There you go. Listen to it. Shouts to all those who came before us and those who will come after us. And I'll leave you with page 119. Breathe out and sit with the courage to face the difficult truths of what made you. In both pride and shame are the energies of what you've inherited, not the energies of what you yourself have done. It is how your people stand tall and how your people fall short. Everyone has both. Grounding. Thank you for grounding me, my brother. I am honored to have been with you.
This is such a pleasure. Thank you.
You sitting in this room, you think you're really here. Well, you've persuaded yourself that way. You've acted it so damn well that you know this is the real world. But you're playing it. We haven't realized that life and death, black and white, good and evil, being and non-being, come from the same center. They imply each other. What you are basically, deep, deep down, far, far in, is simply the fabric and structure of existence itself.
Books burn and
than just in sustaining bliss. Let's suppose that you were able every night to dream any dream you wanted to dream. And that you could, for example, have the power within one night to dream 75 years of time. And you would naturally, as you began on this adventure of dreams, you would fulfill all your wishes. You would have every kind of pleasure you could conceive. And after several nights of 75 years of total pleasure each, you would say, now let's have a surprise. Let's have a dream which isn't under control. You would get more and more adventurous, and you would make further and further out gambles as to what you would dream. And finally, you would dream where you are now.
This has been the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. And I personally want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. Now, the fee for this episode is simple. If you found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, remember that life doesn't happen to us. It happens for us, so long as we rip the pen out of fate's hand and become the author of our own story. So my friend, pick up the pen and we'll see you next week. Lots of love.